I am Enrico Auricchio, the founder of Belgioioso Cheese. For those who don't know, Belgioioso means beautiful and joyful. I came in 1979 from Italy with my family and the memory of how a good Italian cheese is supposed to taste. This is one of our secrets for making award-winning cheeses. Try our provolone, mild or aged, you can taste the Belgioioso difference. You will enjoy and remember our flavors. Belgioioso cheese, tradition, artisan quality.
Belgioioso cheese is committed to the highest standards of quality while handcrafting Italian specialty cheeses that deliver award-winning flavors. Appealing to operators across all segments, Belgioioso cheeses provide the quality that elevates any menu, helping to build guest satisfaction and return visits. At Belgioioso, every cheese is a specialty. Welcome back to ACF Chefs Forum. Thank you to Belgioioso for sponsoring this webinar. Now, more than ever, it's important for culinarians to connect, to share, and to offer inspiration and mentorship, which is exactly why we're excited to have experts here with information just for you, the leaders and future leaders of the food service industry. I'm Jackie Pressinger, American Culinary Federation's Director of Strategic Partnerships, and I'm delighted to welcome you to today's very special and exciting presentation on charcuterie. Today, we'll be taking questions for our featured Master Chef presenter live during this webinar as we are able. So please be sure to use the chat function to collaborate with other chefs and students tuning in, and the Q&A function to pose questions to today's featured chef. So let's get that conversation going in the chat. Please let us know where you're tuning in from today if you haven't already. Now, today's featured guest is Chef Tim Bucci, who earned his Certified Master Chef designation in March 2019. He's an instructor at Joliet Junior College in Illinois, and also earned the title of ACF National Educator of the Year in 2009. His list of awards and accolades is very long over his illustrious career, and Chef has also been awarded 25 gold medals, 23 silver medals, 4 bronze medals in ACF sanctioned competitions, and he was also a member of the 2012 Culinary Team USA, where he earned multiple medals at both the IKA Culinary Olympics in Erfurt and also at the World Culinary Cup in Luxembourg. I could go on and on. He's such a talented and accomplished chef. We're so excited to have him today to share. So at this time, please join me in welcoming Master Chef Tim Bucci. Chef, at this time, I'm going to pass the presentation over to you.
Great. Good morning, everybody. Welcome you to the webinar. That's quite an introduction, which I think I'm going to do my best to try to live up to it. So today we're going to talk about charcuterie, and charcuterie is such a broad subject, and I'm hoping to get everything that I planned to do today in this 45-50-minute demo. Feel free to ask questions, as Jessica said, so that I can answer, or Jackie, I'm sorry, answer questions as we go along so that you don't forget them. The first item that I'm going to talk about and demo is it's kind of a play on a chicken ballantine. So ballantine is typically a boned out leg and thigh of poultry, kind of means like parcel or bundle that you would stuff with a force meat, and you could poach it, roast it, you could serve it hot or cold. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about the science of making a force meat or a mousseline, so that you can really understand how and why that we create this kind of matrix of protein, fat, and moisture, which I feel is the most important part of this part of charcuterie. So the first item, I have just a whole chicken. I have a lot of these parts already made. I'm using gloves. I don't normally use gloves when I fabricate products because I feel like, I want to be able to feel the protein. I want to feel the bones and any cartilage or anything, especially if I'm fabricating fish. I can always wash my hands. It's not a big deal. So in terms of getting the skin off of this, so we're going to take a poultry skin. We're going to create a mousseline force meat. We're going to do a little bit of something different with the breast and the tenderloins. and make kind of like more of a modern interpretation of a ballantine, similar to a galantine, but a galantine is typically poached and served cold. So the first thing that we're going to do, just make sure everybody can see, is we're going to take out the wishbone so that we can get all the meat off of this bird. We don't lose anything. And in today's times, with prices of products being so high and wages increasing, we really got to be very cost conscious about utilizing every product that we're dealt with. So we don't have anything go to waste. We don't throw anything in the garbage. So I've taken out the wishbone. Now the wings, I'm just going to kind of cut the wings off at that second joint right underneath the paddle. Okay, we could save those. Last night on our menu here, we did a little special with the paddle of the wing. If you want to like French this, it's very simple. If you take this wingtip and just put your finger behind it, you could just bend this back down and you could French it just like that, as easy. Cut the tip off, take out that small bone without cracking it, of course. And then if you wanted to, you could stuff this with a little bit of the force meat. You can bread it. So then you have a little drumette right from that paddle. Just a lot faster production as far as manipulating that wing. We're going to turn this over on its breast, backside up. We're going to go ahead and just cut down. And now I'm just going to basically remove the skin instead of removing the meat. I know some chefs might remove the meat from the bird. And I'm just going to kind of like undress this chicken carefully. We don't want to tear it. Okay. You might have some little holes by the wings. Okay. My sister said that she was excited to hear that I was doing a webinar on charcuterie and that she was going to learn how to make a charcuterie board. I basically told her that she had to Google that. So we're not going to get into that today. So over here, to get this little piece of skin off of the wing, I kind of get like under the wing, like by the armpit, and I make a little hole under there, and then I'll just pull that skin off, again, without tearing that skin. We want to leave this skin as intact as possible. So we just get kind of underneath that armpit and then grab that skin, pull that off. And then now we can go ahead and pull it off the rest of the way. If there's a section that is a little bit hard, you can use your knife to remove it. We don't want to keep tearing and ripping. In my class, I'm very particular about terminology. When students say, like, should I just rip it off? I definitely correct them because they get a little bit violent with some of the products. So we want to carefully take that off. And then we have kind of a beautiful skin here. Put that aside. Now, as far as like just a very quick fabrication, now that we have that off, we can go ahead, remove that. I'm going to save the legs for another purpose. We could bone out this leg here quickly, just work around the knuckle. Okay. And just kind of press that down. And then you could almost fill that. You could bread this and deep fry it. You can clean it up. Once you take the bone out, bread it, deep fry it, and then you have kind of like a nice stuffed leg that you could deep fry. We're just using the thighs in this. You could definitely use the chicken legs. It's just a lot of sinew that we don't really want to tend to, okay, right now. Take the breast off. And then really just stay close to the carcass. I'm not really worried. If you want to take the wings off with it and then cut the wings off afterwards, you can. And then we could save these for another purpose. So we have our breast. Now, we get in our restaurant here at Thrive. So my class runs the restaurant called Thrive at the college. we just focus on basic solid techniques, cooking, incorporating charcuterie elements, and really about utilization and just creating some delicious food. So I have the breast. Obviously, we'll save that carcass for stock. The tenderloins for this recipe, what we do with these is we give them a brine of 7% salt sugar solution. So if you have 32 ounces of water, 7% of that, a little over 2 ounces, give them a soak for about an hour, rinse them. And then if you wanted to, you could dry them in the cooler to form a little pellicle so you get a little bit better smoke adhesion. A pellicle is this sticky protein surface that happens on the outside of cured or brine meats that is going to basically adhere that smoke to the product better. You get a better snap on the casing. So we already brined our tenderloins here, and then we cold smoked them and diced them for this item. Now the breast, what we do with this, and I try to do things that are not too manipulating the protein, but we basically cut this in half. And then I'll show you the whole assembly of this product as well. So we cut these in half. If you wanted to, you could brine these, you can cold smoke these, you could marinate them, you can coat them in a spice. There's a lot of different things that you can do with this before you start to build this Ballantine, okay? Those aside, and then we have our leg and thighs. I'm not going to show you both. I already have some meat ready to go. We're just going to go ahead and bone out this thigh here, get underneath. Now, one thing I do like to do after I bone out my thighs, get all the meat off of the bone, is there's a little membrane that holds this thigh, all these muscles together, okay? And what I like to do is kind of bring this to the base of my board so that my knuckles are off the table. And then I'm going to kind of work away or towards my knife hand, whichever, if you're a lefty or a righty. And where that bone was, I'm just going to make kind of a very light cut. And I'm just going to start to get my knife nice and flat and cut that meat away from this membrane that kind of holds on to the muscles. And then you have less that's going to get caught up in your grinder before, and then also in your RoboCoupe when you're going to go ahead and process this. So we would dice that up. We would get that all ready. Okay. So now, Nick, can you take that? I have my, this is the chicken Ballantine. We have 8 ounces of meat, and I'll share the recipes with you. We have 8 ounces of meat. And we also have 2 ounces of chicken fat or chicken skin. And I try not to use some of that skin, that fat that's very soft, kind of towards the neck or the breast region. This is just chicken skin. And you got to be very careful with chicken skin because chicken skin doesn't really emulsify that well. It's very soft. What we want to do anytime you're making a sausage, anytime you're making a mousseline or any salami, I always salt the meat first, okay? Meat and fat, and really mix this. So salt has a huge role in making force meat, okay? Yes, it gives it flavor, it preserves it, but it also helps to pull out the proteins in the product, the soluble proteins, the actin and the myosin in the proteins. And what it creates is something called actomyosin, which is a sticky kind of a protein, a soluble protein, okay, that you can pull out of the meats, chicken, pork, fish. There's also albuminous proteins. That actomyosin is higher in muscles that are worked more or older. So there's binding indexes in meat, okay? And what does that mean? Like bull meat has a index, meaning it's going to bind very well because it's an older animal. It's worked a lot. A pork loin, obviously you wouldn't want to use that for sausage. One, it's too expensive, but it doesn't bind well because it has a very low binding index. A chicken thigh is going to have a very good binding index. I know some will use chicken breast to make a mousseline. I'm kind of like against that. It's a great piece of protein. I save that for my prime protein. It's easier to make it because there's not a lot of sinew that you have to remove. If you clean the product well, you won't have to worry too much about that. Now we're going to grind this, and I'm just going to show you very quickly. I got a lot of steps already done. One of the biggest things I see when people are grinding is that they just force too much in the grinder. Okay, so this meat was partially frozen, salted, and worked to bring out those soluble proteins, the actin and the myosin. And again, it creates something called actomyosin, which is a sticky protein that's going to be responsible for creating this matrix of fat, protein, and water in your product. Okay, it's kind of like making a mayonnaise, a hollandaise, any item that is an emulsion. So what's happening is these soluble proteins are, you're going to pull these out. They're going to kind of dissolve and encapsulate the fat. So they're going to encapsulate this fat with these soluble proteins. And then you have other protein strands that are keeping all this fat particles and moisture in this matrix or an emulsion. When you process items above 40 degrees, you want to keep this meat very cold, you can lose that emulsion. If you don't bring out those soluble proteins, you could lose that emulsion, okay? And then what happens is your product starts to break and your fat leaks out, okay? So then we have this ground meat here. Now, what we're gonna do is we're gonna make an emulsion. I'm gonna take my gloves off and RoboCoop. Switch the things around. Right. So again, we want to keep everything very cold. Okay, this was a RoboCoop. I had it in the freezer. Cold, meat, fat, salt. Okay, grind it, pull out those proteins. There's an acronym called, it's SSHCP, which means salt soluble, heat coagulable proteins. So basically you pull out the proteins in the meat, they're soluble proteins. You create that emulsion. When you go to cook it, proteins coagulate and holds on to that moisture and fat in this matrix or an emulsion, okay? Now we're gonna process this meat and fat with the salt. So I don't have anything else in here. Spices or products that interfere with the emulsion. So again, we want to keep everything very cold. You could tell almost immediately that you are forming this emulsion. It's kind of like this rubbery texture, okay? I can feel it. It like kind of stretches. It has some elasticity to it. If you don't feel that, then something went wrong. The meat, you know, if you use frozen meat, you can still make a good emulsion, but what I like to do is salt it a little ahead of time and let some of that salt pull out some moisture in the meat. So, you know, charcuterie being part of garde-manger, we have to try to keep things and you know, and use them so we can save money, right? So we want to make a profit. So if I'm filleting a lot of fish and I have a lot of portions of fish tails or something like that, I freeze. Maybe I want to use that in a force meat or a mousseline. I would dice those up. I would salt them, let them sit for about an hour, dry them off, and then I would just use that salt in my emulsion, and that's going to help to kind of tighten those proteins, bring those out, and create a good emulsion, okay? So we want this to be smooth. Scrape it down occasionally. Okay, so again, you could see that rubberiness, right? It doesn't even want to fall off the rubber spatula. Again, everything is cold. I got ice, my rubber is cold. Once I feel this meat and fat is smooth, then I'm going to go ahead and add my spices, because you could see now that it's like very stretchy. Okay, that's good. That's what I like to see when this happens. All right. Now we're going to add our spices, and then I'm going to start adding my egg yolks. Now, some chefs might use egg white. Some chefs might use whole eggs. I like the use of egg yolk. And certain items, you don't even really have to use what I call a secondary binder. So the initial binder is the protein in the meat. The secondary binder would be the egg protein. We're going to extend this a little bit with some cream. We want this to hold up a little bit. Now, we don't want to over process this. So give it one more scrape, and then I'm going to all right. Now, I have a tammy. I'm going to go ahead and press this force meat through a tammy. I have some already done, so I'm not going to show you, but I do want to just show you the process. A lot of people kind of go about this very wrong. You know, they take a bench scraper and then they will just kind of scrape it. What I want to do is kind of work in like quadrants of this tammy, okay? The reason why we're putting this through a tammy is to get rid of any little bits of sinew that maybe we miss. So basically, rubber spatula, bench scraper works good. And I'm just going to kind of press this. Okay, I don't want to like scrape it because it's going to agitate it. It's going to create friction. It's also going to create heat. Okay. Once that part of that tammy starts to get kind of clogged with some of that sinew, then I can work in other areas. Okay. And just keep kind of working around. Now, what I have then is I'll have a force meat. Once I get done with this, I'll have a force meat that's nice and smooth. You can still see it has some really, you know, awesome tackiness to it. But I'll keep working this through a tammy so we can get all that sinew out, so this doesn't affect the texture of our finished product. Okay. All right. So that's putting through a tammy. Now, I have some plastic wrap on my table. I lightly dampen the table, very lightly, so the plastic wrap sticks, okay? Now, I have a piece of skin here that I had already kind of cleaned, and I'll explain what I did to that. Now, like I said, you're going to have some little holes where the wings were or the leg. So basically what I did was I kind of scraped a little bit of the excess fat off of this, right by the kind of collarbone on the breast, where fat kind of develops, okay? Now, here is our finished mousse that we put through a tammy, okay? It's nice and smooth. We're gonna add some garlic. And now we're gonna fold in our cream. And when we fold in our cream, we want to do that over ice. And we want to kind of do that a little bit at a time. Some people will run it in a RoboCoupe. Again, you got to be careful with the amount of friction and heat you're developing. Okay, you want to keep this very cold so the fat doesn't start to smear and the cream starts to heat up. Okay. And you're kind of looking, this was a tip from certified master chef Fritz Sonnenschmidt, one of the best Garde Manger chefs out there, that your texture of your force meat should kind of resemble chewing gum. And I hope I'm doing him justice by saying that, but it's one of the things I remember from one of his bratwurst classes. And it's something that I've always kind of looked for. It's something I teach my students with, kind of looking for like a soft chewing gum consistency. So that to me looks good. I could feel it kind of stretch in the bowl, which I want to feel that stretch, that elasticity, and that's those proteins coming out. Now, I have my smoked tenderloins, and then I have some turnip greens. So we buy baby turnips here at the college. We use them in dishes, but then, you know, I like to utilize everything of the product, okay? So I have some turnip greens that we did just a chiffonade. They're raw, okay? You can use spinach, you could use basil, but I do like that. I also like that little bit of bitterness that it gives, just to kind of offset some of this richness. Now, those tenderloins, as I said, were smoked, cold smoked. All right. Okay. So what we're going to do is, and if there's any questions, please feel free to hit that chat button. Subscribe. Oh, wait, no, this is not.
Chef, we are seeing some questions come in. One of them was in the acronym mentioned SSHCP. What does the C stand for?
Coagulable. So like coagulate, like proteins coagulate. So salt soluble, okay, heat coagulable, okay, proteins. So basically what happens to proteins when you apply heat, but the term is called coagulable. It's kind of a mouth, it's a tough word to say.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I'm not sure if this is a good time to ask. I know you're right in the middle of the demonstration, or if you want to cover this after the presentation, but we are getting several questions coming in about chefs who are hopeful to one day take the CMC exam. And if you had any advice for those who are currently considering.
Yes, I will definitely save time for that. And we'll touch upon that at the end, if that's okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So what I'm doing, I'm leaving about a 1-inch space on the top of the skin, on the bottom. I'm kind of dampening my offset spatula so the force meat doesn't stick. And we're going almost to the end of this. Now I'm going about a 1/2 inch. I want this to be maybe less than maybe 1/3 of an inch. I want this to be thin. I don't want it to overtake the chicken breast that we're going to use. So right here, I have a little bit of, this is a fennel and carrot top powder. So we have baby carrots. We have a lot of baby carrots here. We have a lot of fennel, and we take all those green tops and we dehydrate them and turn them into a powder. Right now, I can smell that fennel. I can smell that a little bit of the carrot. Carrot tops don't really taste like carrot, but the stem really does. So this is going to give us some nice color, and it's a utilization product. So we're not throwing, if these carrots cost $2.99 a pound, those fennel tops, carrot tops cost $2.99 a pound. Okay. Now, I also have a little bit of meat glue that I'm going to just kind of dust the edges of the skin. This is transglutaminase RM, or Activa RM. I prefer to use this product over all the products on the market. Activa RM, it binds very well. It could be used in a slurry form, 4 parts cold water to 1 part transglutaminase, or the short name is TG. There is GS, which is good, but it always has to be used in a slurry. The nice thing about that is you can leave it out all day, which I thought that was kind of interesting, because I don't know why you'd want to leave something sit out all day anyway. So a little bit of meat glue, that's going to kind of hold that skin. It basically creates a bond between the lysine and the glutamine amino acids. Okay, when you bond meat together, okay, that's going to hold that skin to keep it from unraveling after we sear that. Now I have these chicken breasts that I cut in half, and I still kind of remain their integrity. So we're going to put one down, and the other tail, okay? And then I'm just gonna lightly dust that with a little bit more of that Activa RM. And then we'll put our other chicken breast. Now what I'm doing is I'm alternating. So I've got one thick end, one thin end, and one thick and thin, so that it's kind of even, all right? And then a little bit more of that fennel carrot top powder. Some people might use like activated charcoal. Some people use like an ash that they make, but at least this has some kind of utilization, all right? So now we're gonna go ahead and wrap this, okay? And I want that skin to kind of come around the other side. The key to making a tight roulade, getting those sides of your palms and pushing out that excess air, okay? So I've got that nice and tight. We're gonna fold that over. So there was questions about the Master Chef exam, and I'm just gonna bring this up. You know, when people start looking at, like, say, the Garde-Manger section, the buffet platter, this is something that you could do at the exam. It doesn't have to be overcomplicated. It has to be done well. It has to be done at the highest level of execution, and it has to taste good. So, you know, you could work more flavors into this, right? So now we're going to push on that, kind of push away as we're rolling to keep this nice and tight. Okay. Now, if you feel like this is not going to be tight enough, so say if I roll this and it's not tight enough, it's not that big of a deal. We'll take another piece of plastic wrap, get that on our table nice and flat, take that roulade. And again, I'm pushing with the sides of my palms. And sometimes I use my hip, push that right against there. All right. And then I'm just pushing and making sure that's nice and tight. Okay. And that to me looks nice. I don't want it any bigger than that. We'll get 4 portions out of this. So at this point, I would tie this. You know, we don't have to get it too tight. All right. I would tie this now, and I always give my students different ways to cook this. We cook it here in our combi oven, 185 degrees to an internal temperature of 150. There's a little bit of carryover. We chill it down. And then what we'll do is we'll cut it into portions. Okay, we'll cut it into portions after we cook it, after it's chilled. Okay, for service, we will vacuum pack 4 pieces in a bag. We'll drop it in a circulator that is at 150 degrees. And then to order, what we'll do is we'll dry it off, sear it, and serve it. Okay, very great for an a la minute item to be finished. Okay, so you could also just go ahead and cook this, dry it off really well, and sear it. The plate.
Jeff, we had a question that just came in, and they're wondering about your thoughts on using gelatin or aspic versus transglutaminase for binding skin and protein when preparing ballantines, galantines, terrines, or other.
You know, gelatin, albumin powder, that works great when it's cold, okay? Especially gelatin. Albumin powder can work well in a hot application. Sometimes if you put too much, you can see some of that albumin. I used to use albumin powder, egg white powder years ago. Meat glue or transglutaminase has been around for a long time. I like that product. You don't need a lot of it. Okay. Gelatin, I might use a little bit of gelatin to hold something together if I'm serving it in a cold application. Okay. If I'm doing a competition and I want to hold different parts together. Okay. So this is another item that I'm going to show you just very quickly. But what I have here is I have a force meat. This could be any kind of force meat. It could be fish, poultry, duck. And I just kind of rolled it out on plexiglass. I used some little spacers to get it nice and smooth. I have a piece of interior garnish, okay, that I wrapped tightly, and I'm going to talk about that. This is already cooked. If I wanted to, I could sprinkle this with a tiny bit of gelatin and cook it. And then once it chills, it's going to hold its shape. It's going to hold together when I slice it. Maybe that's if you're going to serve it, on a cold platter or something like that, or for a cold item for a salad. If it's a hot application, I prefer to use meat glue for that, or Activa RM. So we have our finished, this is our dish that we use in the restaurant. We have a little bit of braised fennel. We have some pickled peaches. We have a little bit of dehydrated olive. And then the piece, once we retherm it, we'll just go ahead and sear it. We'll baste it with some butter and thyme and shallots and garlic. And then we'll just go ahead and split that. Normally we do a little bit of sea salt. So then you can kind of see this nice interior garnish. You got that nice with the fennel and carrot top powder. This is a sauce that we serve. We make a really intense reduction with chicken and wine and herbs, chicken stock. And we fold it into some creme fraiche and buttermilk. So it's kind of nice and light for this time of the period. This is a roasted peach puree. So this dish is all about like summertime. And then we add a little bit of chili oil. It kind of gets that like fried chicken effect to it with the peaches. Kind of makes sense to me, this southern kind of influence. And then we have our fennel fronds. So, we try to use every part of a product, okay? So it's just a simple dish that we use the Ballantine for. We make a nice sauce. Like I said, we cook it, cool it down, and then we sear it to order. And that's our plate for the restaurant. And the students are able to produce that, okay? Okay.
That looks absolutely stunning, Chef. Thank you so much. We did get a question that came in that is there any waiting time for the glue to work before cooking?
Yes, that's a very good question. I prefer to wait overnight. You should wait at least 4 hours. There is an Activa product, transglutaminase TI. It has higher amounts of transglutaminase in it, but you can't use it with as many products. So that one bonds a lot faster, but you can't use it with every meat product. RM is very versatile, but yes, you should wait at least 4 hours to let that set and let that it basically raises the pH and starts to create that bond with the lysine and the glutamine amino acids. Okay. So I showed you this roulade here. Okay. This is what we would call like a press here. All right. Now, I want to show you this because we talk about like binding, right? Using meat glue, gelatin, albumin, eggs. So what I did with this product here, I'm taking that, just like I showed you earlier, I'm taking this and I'm taking that outer membrane off again, so it just doesn't affect the texture, and really keep that knife flat. And if you really do good, you can really get all of that product off of there, okay? Then what we want to do, now this is a thigh, okay? You got to use a worked muscle. Duck thigh, chicken thigh, turkey works great. Pork shoulder would work well work good as well. And what we're going to do is kind of against the grain, we're going to slice this meat kind of like you would do for like a stir fry. We want that very thin. Okay. Now we talk about proteins and salt. Okay. the main purpose is of that salt. And a lot of people would say flavor. And I agree, but is to get those proteins to come out and create that sticky matrix that's going to help encapsulate the fat and kind of hold on to the water. Okay. Now, what we'll do is we'll take our chicken thigh. I have some kosher salt, about a half a teaspoon. Again, I'll share the recipes. I have no secrets. This is a little bit of ground fennel. You could use a number of different spices, Szechuan peppercorn, pink peppercorn. This is some chiffonata basil and parsley. And I want to kind of work this again. I want to work that protein with that salt. And you can start to see how it's already getting sticky, okay? It's like sticking to my hand. So we can create a bind with just the natural protein. And that's that primary binder in this meat, okay, is the natural proteins, that's salt, okay? So you can see how important that is. And then what I did with that was I rolled it, okay, tight, just like I showed you with the other one. And then what I also did was I kind of pressed it when I cooked it. So I took 2 pieces of plexi, put it on. I always save my rubber bands, okay? And then put the rubber bands on, and then it just gives it a nice flat surface. Now, this is another thing, you know, there was a question on the Master Chef exam. This is a great utilization piece. I'm using a thigh or a leg or something like that. And that's what garde-manger is really about. It's utilizing those underutilized cuts to save and maximize, to save money and maximize profits. Now, if I wanted to, I could dust this with some of that fennel carrot top powder, or if this was fish, maybe it's a nori powder or other type of application. But I like to use things that we don't have to throw away. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, what I would do at this point is I would take this. I could remove my little spacers. I have, you know, bars and pieces of, you know, I spent more time at Menards and Hobby Lobby, and spacers and molds and, you know, for garde-manger purposes. And then I would just carefully wrap this around, and you could dust this with a little meat glue, or you could dust it with that albumin or even gelatin if you're going to serve it cold. I find that there's enough protein in this sausage that's going to hold that together. And then I would basically take that, kind of get right to about this section here, and then I would just carefully cut that force meat and push this away. Now, I might freeze this a little bit to make it a little bit easier to work with. Okay. And then again, I would wrap this, tie it, and I would sandwich it, okay, between my plexiglass. Okay. So I would clean this up. I'm a big fan of like tying, cutting the ends off so it looks nice and clean and pretty. It doesn't help for cooking, but it just, for me, it looks nice. Okay. So then I can kind of create that. Now, once you have that kind of, you know, oval shape, okay, you could sear this after and serve it cold. You could serve it hot. You could wrap it with certain, you can wrap it in chicken skin at this point. You can wrap it in greens that have been blanched if you're going to serve it on a cold platter. If it's edible, so if you're talking Master Chef exam, make sure it's something that's going to taste good. Maybe I crust it in a mix of herbs, or you know, if I serve this hot, maybe it was crusted in like a, you know, a panko that's fried in like some rendered chicken fat that we might save, so it tastes like fried chicken. Okay, so that's one another utilization, but using the natural proteins to bind that. So, you know, if I go to slice that, it's going to hold together. Okay. And that was, and we serve that hot, we serve that cold as well. Okay. All right. One last thing, I just want to kind of go over And I know we're getting close, but like I said, you know, charcuterie, we can go on. Nick, can I get the mixer? We can talk about this, you know, for hours and hours. I'm going to give you a recipe for a chicken Polish sausage. Okay. Now, it's very similar to the Ballantine force meat, except what we did was we ground the meat, fat, salt. Okay. Just like we talked about earlier, we ground that. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to paddle this in a cold mixing bowl. Okay, so we have our ground meat and fat, our chicken skin, all right? Again, another way to utilize that. The problem with chicken skin is that it doesn't want to emulsify well. So what we're going to do is I have some garlic, chopped garlic. We have our spices for our Polish sausage. We got white pepper, dry mustard, obviously the salt. We're going to add a little bit of dextrose. Okay, so dextrose is a corn sugar. It's half as sweet as sucrose, and it doesn't burn like if you're going to use sugar in a sausage. I'm going to add some TCM. That just helps to, which is tinted cure mixture or pink salt. It's just going to help to stabilize the color. It's not going to turn the meat pink. Now we're going to process that for about a minute. So we ground this meat cold. We created that emulsion with that salt, those salt-soluble proteins. Now I'm going to add 0.3% of superphosphate. You can go as high as 0.5%. And then I'm going to add water to this. Now, when you're adding this much water to a force meat, you need something that's going to be able to hold all this moisture in. So what this superphosphate is, or you might see it called special meat binder, or it's an alkaline phosphate. It basically raises the pH of the meat about 0.6 units, and it increases the water holding capacity of your sausage. A lot of sausages use some type of phosphate. If you think about scallops, also like frozen scallops might be packed with sodium tripolyphosphate. It's a water retainer. It's very difficult though trying to saute those, but they're nice and plump, but when you thaw them out, that water exits. So what we're going to do is we're going to mix this just for about 2 minutes. This is kind of more of a modern, like a modified emulsion force meat. You could use a RoboCoupe, you could use a buffalo chopper. But I also just want to show you that if you're adding that much water to a product to create moisture and also to help distribute spices, you can create a really good emulsion. Okay, but again, superphosphate, you do not need that much. The law says you can add up to 0.5%. I use about 0.3%. So in 2 pounds, 2.5 pounds of force meat, I'll use 3 grams. So it's not that much. I use it in like a Euro meat. Gives that beautiful texture in addition to cornstarch. And I know some people will use meat glue in that as well. I tend to not use meat glue in that. I use cornstarch and superphosphate, and it creates a beautiful texture for a nice gyro, especially when you're trying to utilize lamb trimmings and things like that. So you can still see that it does have that kind of stretch, but it's very soft because we added a lot more water to it. So then what we would do with this is we would put that into a casing. Now, it's a chicken Polish sausage that we do. We put it into a casing. I'm not saying that it's pork free, so we do use a hog casing. And then what we'll do, we will let it dry overnight, form that pellicle, uncovered in the cooler. We'll hot smoke it about 185 degrees to 155 internal temperature. and then we'll shower it with a little bit of water afterwards to keep the casing from shriveling up. And then we will score it. So you could see this, we just lightly score it a little bit, and then we grill it to order, okay? That kind of puffs a little bit, those little score marks get a little crispy. And this is on our menu at Thrive as well. And our students do a great job producing this. And the reason I feel like they do a really good job at this, and that charcuterie is starting to become a lot more prevalent today, is people are starting to really understand the science behind it, the how and the why. So we're starting to see a lot of this pop up more. But in today's times, when everything is so expensive, right? Food cost is expensive, labor cost is expensive. We have to find ways and be smart about how to save money and utilize every product that is available to us. So this is our chicken Polish. We make a homemade apple kraut, okay, that we let ferment for about 7 to 10 days. Homemade light rye roll, kind of a soft roll with a little bit of texture to it so it can stand up to the sausage. We do a little honey mustard mayonnaise we use a Kewpie mayo or a Japanese mayo and some caramelized onions. And it's a simple sausage, but it's delicious. The nice thing is everything is made in-house. We make our own ketchup. We make our own fries to serve with that. And not every place can do that because you don't have maybe the staff, but maybe you can pick that one thing that we make in-house. We make this delicious chicken Polish sausage. So this was just a twist on a regular Polish sausage that we adapted to use chicken skin and chicken meat, thigh meat. You can use leg meat, but I don't use breast meat. If you wanted to, you can use the tenderloins. You can fold those in as a garnish. After you grind it or make that force meat, okay? So hopefully, there's about 5 more things that in my mind I wanted to do, but I didn't plan on, doing it just because I know the time's sake and I didn't want to rush too much through this. But the one thing I really want you to take away from this demonstration or webinar is, obviously we got to keep meat cold, right? We got to keep everything cold when we're working, not just for emulsification purposes, but also for bacterial purposes, right? Salt, okay? Anytime we puree something in a RoboCoupe, we grind something, the protein has been salted ahead of time. Cold, 40 degrees, salt, you're gonna pull out those salt-soluble heat coagulating proteins. That actobiosin, which is this sticky kind of plastic, elastic protein matrix with the meat, the proteins encapsulating the fat. The smaller you get it, the more fat. It's kind of like an emulsion of mayonnaise and hollandaise, right? The harder you whisk and incorporate and encapsulate the oil droplets with lecithin in the egg yolk, the more they kind of remain in an emulsion, right? They kind of repel instead of joining back and everything rises to the top. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed the webinar. I hope I kind of answered some of your questions as far as making some charcuterie items. I tried to incorporate as much as I could in a short amount of time. But the key is keeping things cold, salting the products. And if you understand that and the texture, your products, you're going to have very good luck with this. So I thank you very much. And I'm open to any questions that you might have about the test or anything else.
Well, thank you so much, Jeff. I mean, that was just a spectacular demonstration. And I know everyone who tuned in certainly has some great takeaways. We'll have a couple of questions. We won't be able to get to all of them today, unfortunately, but thank you for all who submitted those. One of the questions is about let me see, a first-time competitor. I know maybe not directly related to charcuterie, but they were wondering if you had any tips for someone who is competing for the first time since you've won so many competitions and been on Culinary TV.
First-time competitor. I was there, right? We all were there. We all made our mistakes and we all learned from it. That's the key, is have an open mind when you're doing this competition. First time. what I would recommend is keep things simple. Do what you feel comfortable doing in this setting, okay? You're putting yourself in this arena. People are watching you. You want to feel comfortable what you're doing. Focus on solid techniques. If you want to incorporate a little bit of sausage underneath the skin of a chicken breast or a Cornish hen, that's great. But first competition, what I would recommend is you start slow, get feedback. Once you start getting comfortable in that arena, then you can start building upon that. Okay, so you don't want to go in, guns blazing and try to do too much, and then, things kind of crash and burn. You want to feel good about what you do. So start slow, work your way up, do things that you feel comfortable doing in that setting. Okay, so that's what I would recommend for a first-time competitor.
Thank you very much. And obviously you're a wealth of knowledge when it comes to the food science. And some of the folks who were tuning in were wondering if you had any recommendations for resources or how they could learn more about the science behind the food.
Yeah, I do a lot of research, I hate to say it, on the internet, but I look for like meat science sites. Colleges, universities are great that have like agricultural departments or meat science departments. So I get a lot of information. I don't, in my mind, I can, what I could do is when I forward you the recipes, Jackie, is I'll put a couple of those sites on there that I've used. That, like I said, once you understand the science behind that, it makes things a lot easier to do. So yes, those are kind of, I look for those items. I try to stay away from blogs, unless it's a really good one that I know of that really deals with meat science and things like that.
Sure. Thank you very much. And we'll be sure to share those resources as well in the recipes from Chef and the recording of this session as well to everyone who registered. One other question would be that, oh gosh, there's so many great questions coming in. How long did you prepare and train before you attempted the CMC exam?
That's a very good question. I'll be honest. I started thinking about the Certified Master Chef exam in 2003. I started competing. I started putting myself in that arena with other master chefs. One of my goals was to be on the Olympic team. That is not, you don't have to be on the Olympic team to take the Master Chef exam. I recommend is that you make it every part of your everyday life. Okay. If you can do specials that work items from the exam into your everyday cooking, whether it's continental cuisine, global cuisine, make a bread, do a dessert. So you're kind of preparing for the exam as you're just doing your everyday's work. When I was going to take the exam in 2014, I put a lot of time into it for about 2 to 3 years before that. I read books. I did a lot of run-throughs, and then I ended up having an accident and I had to drop out, which was probably the best thing for me, because then I went back and decided to take it in 2018, the summer. So I only had about maybe 5 months to really start kind of getting back into it. And I did probably 10% of the work at that point. I focused on certain things. I always focused on good food and good cooking. So if you could make this part of your everyday life and do a healthy dessert once in a while, do a little bit of healthy cooking, work on some classical, do some Dover Soul specials or other items from Escoffier, and make that part of your everyday life, you won't have to spend these hours and days just preparing for the exam. You're basically preparing it on a daily basis. So that's kind of how I did it that last 5 to 6 months. I made it part of my everyday. We ran specials in my restaurant here at the college. We did, continental specials, global specials. We did, beef rouladen. We did coulis biac. We did beef chow fun. And then by the time I got to the exam, I already made a lot of these dishes, and I was preparing myself for it that way. So hopefully that answered the question. I could talk a long time about that, but I know time is of the essence.
Well, hopefully you'll join us again because we have so many questions for you. Everyone is just delighted with your presentation. So thank you so much, Chef, for taking the time to be here today. And a huge virtual round of applause as we thank Master Chef Tim Bucci. Again, we appreciate you sharing your skills and your enthusiasm for the culinary craft with the students and professionals who are tuning in today. And my apologies if we didn't get to all of the questions, but if you're interested in learning more about CMC certification, about charcuterie, about exam updates, please feel free to reach out to ACF for more information.
And
please
Jackie,
be on the... Oh, yes, please, Chef.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. If anybody has questions, you can always reach me via email. Okay.
Very kind.
tbucci@jjc.edu. I'm always happy to help, mentor, ask questions. So if you would like to do that, I would be happy to take any questions in that matter as well.
That's amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Chef. And for those of you tuning in, you will receive a survey along with the recipes, the resources, and the recording. Please fill out the survey in order to earn your 1 hour of ACF CEH. And you can register now for some of our upcoming webinars. Please join us on September 22nd for a discussion for emerging professionals or those who are considering a career change for our discussion about culinary career pathways for the food service industry. And join us again on September 28th, as we'll be discussing how to optimize your operations and labor efficiency through cleaning and sanitation best practices. And we have a great lineup of webinars for the remaining fall series. So please go to wearechefs.com and you can search webinars to find out more information and to register. So we had a great time at ACF National Convention in Las Vegas about a month ago. Please join us as we head to New Orleans, July 17th to 19th, 2023. You can go to acfchefs.org for more information about events and to register. So again, on behalf of the ACF National Office, thank you again to Belgioso for sponsoring today's education. And of course, thank you to the amazing Chef Tim Bucci for bringing us this delicious learning opportunity. And thank you for joining us today. I hope everyone has a great weekend and we'll see you at the next webinar. Have a wonderful day.